Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next amazing interview. Today, I'm with Shiva from Tamu, and we're going to be talking about not only what it's like being a vegan in corporate life, we're going to dig into a little bit of Shiva's background as far as the experience that Shiva brings to the table. But more importantly, we're also going to talk about what it's like to be a vegan entrepreneur in today's environment. We're going to talk about the twists and turns that not only many of you are making out there in the world as you're repurposing, finding your new way in this new age that we're in, but I also hope that many of us can learn from Shiva today to talk about the adjustments, the pivots that Shiva has done in this current environment. I'm really excited because we have an opportunity to bring on an international guest. I think a lot of times we often get a little too US centric sometimes when we're having our discussions about veganism and the vegan business world. So I really love it when we're able to bring in someone who can give us a little bit different perspective on what that business landscape is like, what growth is like, and also maybe I can even ask Shiva some perspectives on where he thinks that the kind of industry is going from there. So first, let me just welcome our guest. Welcome, Shiva, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on the show.
So, just to ground our discussion, before we go deep into your business, what I want to do is just give people a little bit of background about yourself. Everyone loves to know that there are all these amazing vegans in the world. So, maybe give everyone a little bit of background on how long you've been vegan and a little bit maybe in your backstory on why or your journey to becoming vegan.
So I was raised in a very Indian family, although, we spent a fair bit of time outside India, but mine is very much an Indian family. I was raised vegetarian. And then I've always been, I was always involved in animal welfare. I used to volunteer at shelters and things like that when I was in university. But somehow, growing up back in the 90s when, you did not have internet, one didn't really make that connection between consuming dairy and what goes on with animals and what animals go through in dairy farms and the meat industry. I turned vegan much later, 12 years ago to be precise, and that was literally off the back of a 2-minute conversation which I had with a colleague back in the UK when I was working there, and it was in the cafeteria in our workplace where we were waiting for our lunch, and the meat section used to be busy and the vegetarian section used to be not so busy. So I was one of the few guys. So I was one of the few guys waiting there. And there was this other colleague of mine. I didn't know him. He was from some other part of the organization, and then it was a 5-minute wait, and I casually asked him if he was vegetarian as well. He said, "No, I'm vegan." And then he said, "You should go vegan too, because the dairy industry kills cows." I was like, done. And that's how I went vegan. So I went cold turkey. It was literally off the back of a 2-minute conversation. And I don't think I've looked back since.
Oh, that's great. It's wonderful when you meet another person and they can kind of, give you a little bit of perspective on it. But it's pretty awesome that you just needed that small encouragement to really make that leap. Do you ever keep in touch with that person? I'm just curious, or that was just more of a conversation that happened and went?
No, I mean, there was really no opportunity to stay in touch that way. He worked in a different part of the organization, and we did run into each other from time to time, and but we did not really, I'm very grateful to him for that conversation, and he ended up inspiring a very powerful change in my life, for which I'm very grateful to him. But no, to answer your question, no, we haven't kept in touch.
Yeah, it's amazing the people that we meet like in life that can change our whole trajectory, in our lives. But sometimes they're there for a brief moment of time. So you mentioned, you were working in the UK, you were working in the UK, you had this experience. Maybe walk us through a little bit of background. What was it like in corporate life? What was it like in that position as a vegan, where, living the life? And then also, I think when we talked a little bit before we got started, you let me know about how you guys started kind of bringing people together to create some camaraderie. So maybe let's tell the audience about that as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, this was 12 years ago, veganism was still, very much at its infancy. There was, let's maybe just focus on the corporate aspect of it. So most large corporations, they have cafeterias, and the typical challenges that vegans and perhaps vegetarians as well face is the risk of cross contamination. Food being cooked in the same sort of cooking surfaces and utensils and things like that. There is not enough information on in terms of labeling the food items that have been prepared in terms of what they contain. You don't get almond milk or soy milk that easily in the coffee and tea counters. So I did try to talk to the cafeteria to see if any of these could be changed, and it shouldn't surprise people that I really didn't get anywhere with it. With those conversations did not really go anywhere. Again, through stroke of luck, a few of us, I happen to know a couple of other vegans in the organization, and we used to have an internal company chat platform, where you spoke to colleagues, and I think that is something that a lot of corporations these days have. So that's probably something to note for what I'm about to say. So because we had an electronic platform to get together, it helped us group ourselves formally as a vegans club. So we kept it very open. We said non-vegans are welcome, meat eaters are welcome. We are open to all kinds of views. It's just that the main purpose is not so much to defend veganism, but just to raise a bit of awareness about veganism. Just let people know that we are a group of people who believe in this philosophy. So, but what also happened was, as soon as we made ourselves into a formal sort of group, it meant that when we had conversations with, say, the cafeteria, we were taken much more seriously, because it was not one individual going, it was more than one individual. It can be just three, but once it's a formal group, you're all of a sudden taken much more seriously. And a couple of things that I would like to mention that we actually managed to affect changes in the cafeteria, where there used to be a stir fry cooking counter to make stir fry, with meat and seafood and vegetables and so on. So we actually managed to get ourselves a separate stir fry counter, a cooking surface for vegans, which it does take up space, admittedly, but we're quite pleased, and actually we were pleasantly surprised that they actually agreed to have a separate cooking surface for us. And it goes on to show how much change you can actually affect if you're a formal group. And the other thing was that information in terms of labeling food items in terms of what they contained also was much better. So yeah, and then lastly, we did it did let us do a few fun things as well. As colleagues, we went out once a month. We explored vegan restaurants. We explored non-vegan restaurants. We would dial and say, we're a bunch of 10 vegans showing up, and please could you make sure that we have some vegan options this evening. So all of that meant that we could affect changes in our workplace, and we could also let neighborhood restaurants know that let them know
there's
that
demand for veganism, for plant-based food. There's interest.
Yes.
So yeah, I love that. And I love what you said about the group wasn't necessarily to defend veganism. It really feels like your group was more of a bridge. It was more of the experience. It was more of even allowing people to come in who may not be ready to be, getting the vegan tattoo, but they want to explore. They wanted to go to restaurants. They wanted to get a better understanding. And I think it's so important that we as vegans have groups like that as well. We definitely need the hardcore vegan groups, but we also need some groups where people can come in, explore, hang out, and really feel like they have a friendly environment to learn. And also, like you said, about create demand and explain the demand in local restaurants, explain demand in the cafeteria. So I think it's great what you were able to do. And I really hope some of our listeners today, if they're struggling in their environment, they maybe use some of that advice. So let's fast forward to today, or let's fast forward to 2020, I guess. And let's talk about maybe how the year started for you in your business, and then maybe give us a comparison of where things are today. How much or how have things changed with your, actually, you know what? I should have done a backstory question. First, let's give everyone a little bit of understanding of the type of business you have. I forgot, I knew because we talked in the beginning. So let's tell them the type of business you have and what business you had when you originally started. And then we can do the comparison of how it's changed post-pandemic.
So I run a business called Tamu in a city called Chennai, which is in Southeast India, which is where I'm from. It's the only vegan restaurant stroke cafe in the city at the moment. We, for reasons that I'll explain in a minute, we look for foods that are accidentally vegan. We don't look to veganize anything. And the reason for that is there are a couple of reasons. One is that veganism is still very much at its infancy here in India, and to actually offer vegan alternatives for what people otherwise consume, there's really not much of a market for it, and I don't know if there's much acceptance as well. So there is much less resistance if you went with something that was accidentally vegan and appealed to the culinary preferences of this part of the country. So we zeroed in on Mediterranean food, falafels, hummus, pita bread, and so on. And that cuisine we thought would be something that offered a lot of vegan alternate things that were already vegan, and there was no need to veganize, and would actually appeal to the customers here. So Tamu started literally as a falafel and hummus shop back in 2019, last year. And then because of local business circumstances, we fairly quickly realized that cafe or a restaurant was not necessarily the way to scale the business up. So late last year, we sort of changed our trajectory a bit and we still run the restaurant and cafe, by the way. It has helped us, build the brand, define the brand, understand the brand ourselves, and so on, and see customer feedback. But in terms of what we thought was the way to scale the business up, we moved away from wanting to expand the cafe or open new branches. We instead started focusing on meal boxes. Meant for corporate custom, workplaces and families and homes. So a typical Indian meal, if you went to any a traditional Indian restaurant, usually shows up in a plate. It's got half a dozen to a dozen different things in small bowls, various different kinds of vegetables, lentils, and so on, soups, and so on. A bit of bread or some rice in the middle. So that's typically how a vegetarian Indian meal is formatted. So the idea was when we designed the meal boxes, the vegan meal boxes, the idea was very much for our meal boxes to look and feel like what a typical Indian meal box would feel. Although the ingredients, some of the dishes that we were using were clearly not Indian, but it still sought to kind of feel like a format that people are used to. So that worked out quite well, actually. So locally, we have a handful of small offices, including the U.S. Embassy, by the way, which happens to be not too far from our restaurant, who we count as our customers. Yes. So we have staff from local workplaces that are beginning to show interest, and this was going on until February, when clearly the pandemic affected us. And yes, we have had we've had it has impacted us fairly severely. We've had a sharp slowdown in our revenues, but equally, it's also given us the opportunity to do a couple of things. One is it has reiterated our confidence. It has reiterated our it has made us more confident of our strategy to focus on meal boxes, because I think especially when you're talking international cuisines, trying to bring international cuisines, it does help to sort of make it boring and day to day. Because then, going to tamu shouldn't really be an occasion. It shouldn't be a treat. It should be there available every day. And that's the way to scale up. The other thing that this pandemic has taught us, and I don't think we are alone in this, it has given us the opportunity to try to understand what digital media can do for us, social media can do for us. Admittedly, we have not been, we have not used it as much as, we probably should have, but we are beginning to try to do better in that space.
Now, you mentioned social media. So walk me through, what did you do differently? Did you start taking more pictures of the dishes? Did you start giving people updates of what would the menus look like? What were some of the things that you started to do differently?
So to just give you a little bit of backstory, my personal belief is that a lot of many businesses, when they post pretty pictures on Instagram, the feeling that I get is that sometimes, and perhaps more often than not, it's a bit of a struggle to connect that picture on Instagram to reality. I've struggled to convince myself that if I actually went to a restaurant, the food is going to look and taste as delightful as it looks on an Instagram post.
That is true. It is a very high bar at times.
So we were actually quite reluctant, and we actually tried to make our pictures boring and as real as possible on our Instagram page when it started out. Perhaps what we missed out in the process was that there is a bit of value in making your food visually appealing on social media, and there is a bit of confidence also that we have that our food is actually good because we've had good responses. So both those things mean that we're trying to make our pictures look a bit better now.
Yeah, it's amazing where how we feel about some of these platforms and how we have to use them as business owners and marketers sometimes is a little bit different. But I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, with the pictures and how beautiful they should look. Even when I take a picture of myself, I'm like, can I not do all the makeup and everything? That's not how someone would bump into me at the grocery store, So I completely understand what you mean. So when you were talking about the business, you were saying you were doing more of the cafeteria. You started to move towards doing delivery with businesses and then doing the kind of meal kits and boxes. Are you starting to see that people are buying the boxes, kind of like you said, as far as everyday life instead of it being a treat? Or do you still think that there's a little bit of time for people to make that transition just because of everything that's going on in the pandemic, that, there's so much uncertainty? Or are you starting to see people settle down and realize that they really should be getting meal kits, should be getting food delivered directly to them?
There is I think April and May were probably the worst months when people were probably the fear quotient was at its highest. So those are probably the worst months. I feel now that although the numbers are still going up throughout the world, in many parts of the world, I think people are a bit more at peace with it, a bit more relaxed about it. So we are seeing an uptick in the business this month. I mean, it doesn't quite compare to what the kind of numbers we saw in January and February, but it's at least the trend is in the right direction.
Perfect. And then what about feedback? How are you doing with getting feedback with your meal kits and so forth, especially since you might have been used to that feedback when people were coming in and picking up food? but it's a little bit different now that you're doing delivery. Do you have or feel like you have a good feedback loop, or how has that changed now, post pandemic?
I don't have we don't have much of a feel for it, because the customers that we're actually getting now are the ones that were coming that were our customers even before the pandemic. So
Oh, nice. Okay.
yeah, so it's very much the same set of customers, many of whom we know on a first name basis. So it's the same set of customers. And yeah, I mean, we do from time to time ask them if we are still managing to keep the quality up, and most of the times it is. And if they do have a problem with something, they do point it out to us, for which we are grateful.
Yeah. And I just brought it up because for a lot of people, when they started to pivot their businesses, what they struggled with is how to keep that personal touch, how to keep that personalization that they had like pre-pandemic, now in post-pandemic. So that's more of why I asked that question, because sometimes it's not just how you deliver your product, but it's also how you communicate with your customers sometimes has drastically changed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the that is necessarily applicable to us just because of where we are in our journey. I don't think we are at the sort of size where uh, that is something we have to worry about now.
Okay.
But when I think of the next phase of expansion, when we get bigger, it's something that does that does worry me.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Now, we did have a question. Arzu asked, what was the future of veganism in Turkey? I'm not sure if, Arzu, if you'd noticed that our guest is actually in India. So I don't know if you want to talk about the future of veganism in India. If you know anything about Turkey, if you want to offer that as well, or anywhere in the world, we'd love to hear it as well. So I'll throw that question out to you.
No, I'm afraid I'm not very familiar with the scene in Turkey. I can tell you about the how I see things pan out in countries like India, where veganism is still very much at its infancy, and some of those points might be applicable to Turkey as well.
Right.
Because yeah, so I think a lot of countries like India, and perhaps even the Middle East and West Asia, and I don't think I'm making a bad guess here. We are probably about 5 years behind the UK and the US as far as veganism is concerned. And when I say that, I'm talking about awareness, I'm talking about availability of products, I'm talking about the percentage of people who are vegan. Specifically for insofar as India is concerned, I don't think many people think that India is ready to embrace veganism just because we have such a large percentage of vegetarians in this country. That's unfortunately not quite true. The challenges that one faces in convincing a meat eater to give up meat are very similar to the challenges that one faces in getting a vegetarian to give up dairy, and the dairy and meat industries are interlinked. So
Yeah.
So yeah, the challenges are very similar to the sort of challenges that you face in the West, but the community is growing, and I see India where the UK was 5 years ago, which gives me hope. And I won't say hope, it gives me confidence that very soon we will veganism will go from being just a fringe movement to being somewhat minor but mainstream movement. The other thing which I also see in India, and I don't know if this applies to Turkey or the other countries in West Asia, is there is a lot of activists. There are some activists who also try to appeal to the religious beliefs and try to use that that faith to appeal to people's sense of compassion. Views are clearly, people have different views. There's a lot of conflict in terms of whether you should actually be appealing to people's religious beliefs to affect change. I for one believe that you should only be appealing to people's sense of compassion and justice and should keep religion out. But religion being such a central part of our lives here in India, it's inevitable that things get mixed up.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting how different factors can influence people in different directions, and the role that religion and beliefs can play. Even same thing here in the US. Sometimes there's a little bit of a tug of war, and then sometimes there's an alignment. So sometimes we just have to, see it play out. But I'm really excited about the work you're doing. And also I'm really excited about you're creating meals that, to your point, that are naturally vegan, that are not necessarily the fake meats. And even earlier, you had mentioned to me that you weren't even using tofu in your boxes. And that was like a what for me, because most vegans heavily rely on tofu. So it's very interesting how the development of these meals, the development of what you're doing, how you're approaching it a little bit differently. Now, you mentioned that you were doing falafels and so forth. Give me a little bit maybe perspective on, have you added other items to your menu? Are you planning to add other items? Just give me some perspective on kind of maybe where the future of your menus may be going.
Yeah, so at the moment it's Mediterranean, and so we have Lebanese and Israeli. So falafel, hummus, and pita bread are the mainstay of our meal boxes, which is one of the products we have. When we think of adding more products, we are drawn to the Greek cuisine, because that we feel again is something that the Indian customer will take to quite easily. Mexican, because it's spicy. That is also another one on our radar. My personal dream is also to have a Japanese vegan meal box. Yes.
Why did you, if I could just ask, why Japanese?
Oh, it's only because you don't come across too many vegan Japanese restaurants. There's just one of them in London called Itadaki Zen, which we used to frequent, and there was and we liked the sort of spin that they had on the sort of spin that they had on a Japanese vegan meal. You have to be familiar with things like seaweeds. You have to be familiar with their sauces, all of which are so different from the other flavors and the other tastes that we are normally used to. So I think it will be a nice fresh spin on a vegan meal in terms of the flavors and tastes that it can bring.
Yeah, I love Japanese cuisine. I have a large affinity for Japan. It started when I was a kid, and then I ended up getting a degree in Japanese and going to Japan. So when anyone talks about veganizing Japanese dishes, it's just like music to my ears. So it always perks me up. We definitely had another comment come in, but it was just a good morning from David. So I guess we should just say hi and good morning to David. Glad he was able to join us. So as we wrap up our interview today, I guess I wanted to maybe ask you if you had any advice for others out there, individuals who were thinking about considering kind of starting a meal kits or a meal delivery business. Any advice that you have for them, or any recommendations as people are moving forward in their businesses and continuing to adapt, because I know the headlines in the US are getting scarier and scarier as the moment goes on. I don't know how, what the headlines are like where you are. So a lot of business owners are really kind of feel like they're bracing for what may come next. And I think sometimes it's nice to maybe hear what others who have pivoted and made changes through it, what they see as the future, or what some advice you might have for them.
There are probably three things I would say. And, one is, if you are a vegan, if you're a budding vegan entrepreneur or you're a new vegan business, I think a question which you have to honestly seek to find an answer to is, whether, I think for most small businesses, you sort of want to get to a stage, and I think this is true of businesses across various geographies. You want to get to about 50 to 100 customers a day for you to be a meaningful business. So, and that's a question I think you should seek to answer honestly. Your path to getting to 50 to 100 customers, I think, should be and I think that's when you can really realistically begin to call yourself a small business. And in the context of veganism, that can be much harder than you imagine before you start your business. Finding 50 to 100 customers is hard work. So it pays to try to answer that question honestly before you set out to set a business. Or even if you're in the middle of, if you've already started and you're still a very small business and you're trying to expand, I think when you put the question that way, I think it forces you to think of ways to actually get to scale up to that sort of first stop that your business needs to get to. The second thing that I would say is that I think there's a lot of focus at the moment on mock meats, on the plant alternatives for animal products, like alternatives for milk, alternatives for meat, and so on. And depending on where you are, I think sometimes there's a risk of getting carried away and thinking that is solely the future. For example, with where I run my business, that there are other things that have a better chance of working out, like some of the products that we are focusing on, like falafels, hummus, and so on, rather than mock meats. These products, they pretty much serve the same purpose that mock meats serve, which is to eliminate animal products from the food chain. So I think it helps to think beyond mock meats, think beyond alternatives, plant-based alternatives to existing animal-based products. The last thing I would say is doesn't have so much to do with entrepreneurship, but more with workplaces. I just want to take this opportunity to encourage people to think of formalizing themselves into groups in workplaces, because and I want to say that because I've seen it work. I've seen how it helps the cause. I've seen how it raises awareness. I've seen how it makes workplaces more friendly for vegans.
Yeah, I think I love how you broke that down into those three pieces, because not only is it a little bit of advice that everyone can use, whether we're just individuals or whether we're business owners. And I also love the focus on customers. We talk about that a lot in our training. While I love the marketing and the bells and whistles and social media and email marketing and all that stuff is important, I think sometimes we do lose sight of the fact that you really need customers, and you need a certain number of customers to be able to say you're in business, to sustain your business, and really just to keep the business flowing and working. So I really love that you shared that advice. I want to just say thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you so much for staying up late for this session. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yep. And let's just make sure, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, if anyone wants to pick your brain for ideas, if anyone wants to collaborate with you, how can they get in touch with you? Maybe give them your website, social media accounts as well.
Yeah. Do you want me to put that on chat, or do I just say it to you?
You can just say them. We'll have them in the actual description as well, but we'll just say them.
We are www.tamutamu.org. That's the website. And the easiest way to find us is just to Google Tamutamuchennai or Tamutamu India, and you'll find us. I'm at shiva@tamutamu.in. That's my email ID. I have a lot of conversations with a lot of local vegan entrepreneurs. I would be delighted to hear from anyone listening in. That is shiva@tamutamu.in. If you want to reach me on my email.
Perfect. And if they want to follow you on Instagram, because you had mentioned Instagram, what's your Instagram handle?
Tamutamuchennai.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much once again for joining us today and taking the time. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. If you're listening to this as our podcast, we always love comments, even if they come after we've been live. We'll take a look at them and also pass them over to Shiva as well. So thank you once again, and we will be signing off now. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.